let me introduce my panel first of all. So on the far side, we are joined by Joanna Pamphilis, Global Head of Investments and Securities Digital Products at UniCredit. Also with us, Heather Jones, former Chief Client Officer in Payments. Ava Kelly, Chief Product Officer at Thredd. Meryem Erzi, Chief Compliance Officer at Pagaya Technologies, and closest to me, Roberta Cretella, Director, Data and AI Solutions at Compare the Market. A warm welcome to our panel, please. Thank you very much. Well, let's get to it. And I'd like to address two elephants in the room before we go any further. And one, I have a pet hate at events, and I'm sure we've all seen this, when there is a women in or a diversity-based panel and a female presenter is brought out for one singular panel, which for me somewhat defeats the object of what we're trying to discuss as well. So that's one thing I'll address from the start. And secondly, what I want to do is skip the first 20 minutes. I'll explain. Too often, these discussions, you start with the first question is, are things good enough at the moment? Everyone says no in various ways. So we've established that gender diversity within FinTech is not good enough. Are we happy with that? Should we tick that off? Right, we've ticked that off. And secondly, is enough being done? Also, let's tick that off. No, not enough's being done. Are we happy with that? Is that okay with everyone? Just to skip the first 20 minutes and get on to, there are nods. I like this. Right, let's move on to something slightly more constructive about good things, good examples, and turn this into a positive conversation. Anyway, I've spoken for far too much already. I'd love for each of my... There's laughs to my right. Yes, I've definitely spoken too much already. Let's go to 30 seconds from each of my panelists just to introduce themselves. Joanna, if you could lead the way, please.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here today. As I was introduced, Joanna Pamphilis. I'm currently working at UniCredit, responsible for global products, digital products and services across corporate investments and securities, originally from the US, still working on my Italian, and very happy to be here.
Heather.
Hi, good morning. Heather Jones, and I am based out of San Francisco. Pleasure to be here. I've had a long history in payments. Prior to that, I was in AI, so it's coming full circle. Long career over at Visa, and pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Ava.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ava Kelly. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Thredd. We're a next-gen payments processor. We operate in about 50 countries around the world, and I'm responsible for our product roadmap and our market expansion, and great to be here.
Meryem.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Meryem Erzi. I'm the Chief Compliance Officer at Pagaya Technologies, and I'm very, very excited to be here. I've spent over 25 years in financial sector, mostly focusing on consumer protection, compliance, and governance. And Pagaya is a publicly traded company that leverages AI and works with a network of lenders to make credit more available. So it's finance with purpose, and I'm very happy to be here.
And last but not least, Roberta.
Thank you. So hi, everyone. I'm Roberta. I'm currently the Director of Data and AI at Compare the Market. I have about 18, 20 years experience in data specifically. Started as an analyst and programmer while I was at uni, and then data science, and now kind of end-to-end leading data organization. Currently, I'm leading the AI strategy for Compare the Market, not just for data, but across the whole company. And I'm really excited to be here with you today.
Thank you very much. I always like doing that 30-second introduction because I hate it at events when the host sits there and has to read out long biographies of everyone sitting next to them. It's always a little bit awkward, so I always like to do that. Let's start with a bit of context and a bit of background from everyone first, because I'm always fascinated how people have got into a particular industry to start with. Everyone has a different story, and I doubt anyone went into the careers office and said, I'd really love to work in FinTech. I don't think anyone's ever had that conversation at the careers office at high school. Joanna, if I could start with you, a little bit of your background, your backstory. How did you get into this particular circus?
I'll try not to take too much time up because I think we could all share our stories at length. But basically, I was not clear what I wanted to focus on when entering university. I ended up working on campus at the university for the head of the computer engineering department. She was appalled that I was not planning to major in computer engineering. For her, there was nothing else. possible. So I took some courses, found that I had a propensity for it, but I was the only female in the whole program actually at that point in time. So that led to internships in the financial services industry, and slowly my curiosity about the intersection of technology and finance, and how one technology can shape the other in terms of finance grew and grew. And so that was the seed of my career.
Well, hopefully you've been forgiven for not taking that computer sciences course. I'm sure you can
I don't
crack
regret.
it. No regrets. Heather.
So my career started in AI. I worked for MicroStrategy, now called Strategy, and my client was Visa. And I was asked to run their AI practice. I said, why not? Let's try this. And that led into really getting deep with payments. And right before the pandemic, I was asked to stand up a FinTech for issuer processors, just to advance that and move the needle forward. So that was a lot of fun. That was my first official FinTech practice, and we created a center of excellence, really helping the FinTechs that really needed our help the most, but not always the highest revenue. So that was my really first, hands into FinTech, is right before the pandemic and throughout the pandemic. And that's how I met Ava Kelly.
That's right.
Well, that's a seamless introduction. Carry on.
Well, I started in traveler's checks, actually, at American Express, and that's actually when they were still paper, but they were on the way to being cards. So the original stored value product, if you will. And the tech was really in the background. It was really about delivering a customer experience with American Express. I always took that away, is that is what they led with. And I think that carries through to fintechs today in terms of trying to deliver a better customer experience. And then I moved on to spend several years at Visa, and there it was really about data and scale at a global level. And again, big tech, but you could pull any lever and it could really move a market. So you had to be very careful about which levers that you did pull. And then I moved on to next-gen payment processing, which I would say is really under the hood from a technology perspective, where you can pull all those things together, is be able to deliver that last mile for the customer experience, get it down to a very ultra-relevant, personalized level in terms of the products that you can deliver. And work with fintechs. They're really the innovators, so we are there to fuel them and be able to deliver that customer experience at a global scale, through technology. So it all sort of, it's come full circle.
Traveler's checks. How nostalgic.
I know.
I'd completely forgotten they existed. Meryem.
Sure. My path to fintech really started in traditional finance. I've spent my entire career in the financial sector, mostly in banking, again, focusing on consumer protection, compliance, and corporate governance. Prior to joining to Pagaya, I spent 15 years at the Bank of New York Mellon. It is the oldest bank in the U.S., founded by Alexander Hamilton, and now, the largest custodian bank sitting at the center of the, global financial system. So, talk about history meeting scale. And I joined right before the global financial crisis, which meant I was in the thick of regulatory change with the passage of Dodd-Frank Act and the formation of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, and more. But that gave me a unique opportunity to build a global consumer compliance management program to scale from ground up at really uncertain times. So when an opportunity came up at Pagaya, really didn't know a whole lot about the fintech space, right? As a former banker, but what really resonated with me was the finance with purpose. What are they trying to do? And Pagaya is a fintech, publicly traded fintech company that leverages AI and partners with a network of financial institutions to make credit more available to those who may have been turned down through the traditional underwriting. So sort of kind of it was an eye-opener. Again, finance with purpose, and I sort of wanted to be part of it. At the time, it felt extremely risky moving from a structured old bank to a startup culture. It really was like shifting from the stability of an aircraft to agility of a speedboat. But 3 years in, I must say that it's been incredibly rewarding, not only to be part of the growth and success of Pagaya, but to witness and see all this innovation happening across the fintech space. So here I am.
And who wouldn't want a speedboat? Absolutely. Very true. Last but not least, Roberta.
Well, for me, the journey started in a different place from data. It was not specific for fintech. I started actually in online retail. And the motivator for me was always find interesting problems to solve, something that could really challenge myself, how to build a data product at scale, how to use best-in-class technology, latest advancements. And then throughout my career, I just had the opportunity to move at some point into my first fintech job. And since then, I spent most of the time there, besides landing at Meta for a bit. But then since then, it's been probably 7 years in fintech. And I think what really makes me passionate about that is the richness of the data, what you can actually do. And maybe a paradox, some people don't maybe look at it as a downside, like having to work in a regulated environment. Actually, I really like it, is that using data for a purpose, but also in an ethically correct way, protecting the customer, protecting the consumer, really knowing that what you're doing is safe, not just for the company, but also for the customer that you have in front of you. And it's been an awesome journey since.
But I think that's the industry in a microcosm, really. You've got everyone with a different route in, sort of more commercial, more traditional finance. It's fascinating how so many people enter the apex there of finance and technology. Now, normally I'm not a fan of audience participation, but because this is the opening session, I'm going to break my rule. It's not a regulated rule, so that's fine. We were just chatting in the green room beforehand, and Ava has a sort of quiz for us here. So I'm going to let Ava play with this one, and then we'll go from there.
I like audience participation, so I thought I'd start with the quiz. And we were talking about, companies and how many females in the tech industry. So I looked at some stats in terms of the big tech companies, and who has the most representation from a women perspective, and then who has the most senior leaders. So I'll start the first one. There's a couple, the big ones you'll recognize. So between Amazon, Facebook, Apple, Google, and Microsoft, who's got the most women in those organizations? So if I start with the first one with show of hands, who thinks that Amazon has the most? No one. Okay, Facebook?
1, 2, 3,
Couple.
4 or 5, yeah.
Okay, Apple? Oh, that one seems to be leading so far. Google?
Oh, that's a close second, I'd say.
Yep, I'd say that's pretty close. And Microsoft?
That's second
Maybe a
as well.
three-way tie. Well, it's actually Amazon. And then the second one, in terms of which one has the most senior leaders that are women, same lineup of companies. So I'll start again with Amazon. Show of hands on that one. Couple there. Facebook? No one. Apple? Couple. Okay. Google? That seems to be the winner so far.
There's a very confident hand at the front there.
And then Microsoft? Yeah, so those are the last two. It's actually Facebook. So I don't know if Sheryl Sandberg sort of led the way there and created that one, but they actually have the most senior leadership from a women perspective. So anyways, thank you for participating in that, and hopefully that shed a little light.
Well,
but all those companies are ahead of the curve, in terms of women in their workforce and in leadership positions.
I would say Ava's doing a considerably better job at this than I am, so would you want to take over?
No, I'm good.
This is going really well. Well, that leads us into the gender balance question, and thank you for doing that, Ava, because I believe from my latest stats, it's around 28% representation of women in the workforce compared to 44% in other financial fields. That was from EY research. Why is there such a disparity? I'll start with you, Heather, on this one.
Sure. Well, if you think about, technology and finance, FinTech, both are very male dominated. So it's almost like a double whammy when it comes to, why are there less women? So I think that is the reason why I view even less and less women, that we just really need to work harder at evening that out towards a gender parity. So.
Ava?
Yeah, I think it starts at the top. I think women are underrepresented in terms of founders. So when you think about fintechs, it's really those that are entrepreneurs and starting their own companies. And about 12% of the fintechs in the world are actually founded by women. And then I also think that they're underfunded. So you've got about 2 to 3% of the VC funding that's actually going to women. And when they are funded, it's about 50%, up to 50% less in terms of funding. And then I also think from the ground up in the STEM education area, there's less women graduating in those areas. So if you think about it from a top-down and a bottoms-up perspective, you're kind of short on both sides there in terms of the flow into the sector.
I think the funding part of that is so crucial in this conversation. Meryem, your thoughts?
Sure. Just sort of kind of to add to what Heather said, right? FinTech sitting at the crossroads of finance and technology, two industries with long-standing gender gaps, and unfortunately, FinTechs just inherit both burdens. But I think on top of that, when you think about FinTechs operating at early stage, hyper growth environment, where access to networks, access to funding, like Ava mentioned, and risk taking are all very critical for the success of fintech. And these ecosystems tend to be male dominated. And unfortunately, that can, relate to and cause, perpetuate these barriers for women to enter and advance in fintech space.
Thank you. Roberta?
I agree with all the points made, especially, again, if we think about networking, even just having the opportunity to have access to a job in fintech. I think one last element that I would add, of course, is the society we live in. We're still very, very heavily unbalanced in terms of the expectation on men and women in terms of carrying responsibility, caring for the house. Even in our own heads, we think about ourselves differently and put much more demand on ourselves. We're much, much harsher. And sometimes fintech companies start from ground up as startups. And in both the startup, but potentially the scale-up phases, reality is you tend to hire the first 10, 20, 50 hires as maybe people that are in your network. So, okay, already a disadvantage there. But also the rhythms, the benefits that you may have from a startup are not the same as a more established company. And that may be a deal breaker for women that maybe have also carrying responsibility or that are looking for a more balance in their life. So we're not kind of helping ourselves as a society, but it's also true that it may be not the first choice, especially again at the beginning of a new company.
That is such a good point. There's all the stories about how, you are tempted to recruit people in your own image. Whether that's intentional or not, that is such a good point. Joanna?
It's a challenge to be the last person to answer this question because everything that was shared, I was thinking, how would I respond? And okay, Heather took that angle and, et cetera, et cetera. But it's all good. I mean, having had the privilege now of working and living in Europe for some years, the pipeline issue has been an interesting issue for me. And in Europe, actually, in many countries, Italy, Germany, the rate of women entering a university as STEM majors is around 50% fairly consistently. So we talk about a pipeline issue, and I don't disagree with that because this is two countries of many countries. But then when women enter the work environment is not necessarily supportive, it's not necessarily inclusive. Women tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored. So it goes back to connecting about leadership, reflection of who is in leadership, who's at the table advocating, who's creating that inclusive environment. And this is not always needing to be a leadership issue top down. You know, there are organic things that you can do, we all can do on an informal basis to sponsor someone, to mentor someone, you know, just as some simple examples. So even though there's around 50% on average women that are entering STEM majors, when you then track those graduating classes, the drop off 5, 10, 15, 20 years, at 20 years it's single digits, right? It's really telling about the work environment. Certainly culture plays into it, certainly funding in the FinTech space, but I share another dimension for us to think about.
Thank you very much. I want to move on to the why now, if I can. And I'm always very, very reticent and even getting even moderately political on this stage because frankly, I'm not that brave. But the world has very much changed around us when it comes to DEI and representation. I don't think anyone can argue that it hasn't over the last sort of 12 to 18 months. So what I want to focus on is why it's so important to have female leadership in the FinTech sector. Why do we need to make sure that this is still being looked at and addressed and not glossed over? Ava, if I could start with you.
Sure, I'll take a product lens. Women are users of FinTech products. They are over-indexed in terms of mobile wallet use, and actually they're twice as likely to use BNPL products. So when you think about being the user and having them be part of the design of that and understand the user experience and what they're looking for, I think it's actually just critical from a design perspective. So being the product person, I'll lean in that direction.
Thank you. Meryem.
Yeah, I think, when you think about, why do we need female leaders, everything that has been said so far, but I want to take the angle of, you mentioned DEI, diverse leadership teams just make smarter decisions because they're building with everyone, for everyone, and companies that do that always out-innovate. So it really is an innovation strategy. When you have women joining the teams, one, you end up with different diverse perspectives, which we value. But I think the users, as you mentioned, and empowering women is not really a women's issue, right? I think it's a humane issue. It's a societal advancement and investment in the future. Because when women rise, we all rise.
That's a quote of the day already. I quite like that one. Roberta.
I agree on that, and I think, of course, it's a bit of a balance in terms of why FinTech is different. Actually, it's not. It's not any different from any other industry, and we need to empower women. We need to sponsor women more. We want to see more women leaders, and we're on that quest as a society in general. We all want a much better future for our daughters, our sisters, our cousins. But the reality is that if there's no role models that they can look up to, it's very difficult to become something that you have no idea what it looks like, or that you can actually aspire to do anything like that. And if we want to break that pattern, we have to really get this right. And the FinTech space, again, is no difference. It's just that maybe compared to maybe retail, for example, again, is a field where you already start a step behind because it's very heavy in tech, very heavy in financial services. So again, you get the kind of the burden of both worlds, and we have to work a bit harder. From a product perspective, I agree in terms of having that diverse team. We all know about how much better diverse team perform on average, and we know that by character, usually women try to perform better, try to overachieve because we always try to compensate. So from a perspective of a company, it's actually a good investment because you will get people that are really, really motivated and that want to make a mark, want to make a difference. And we still have a bit of work to do. But we have started, as we can see here.
Yes, making a mark and making a difference. I always mention my children during these events, and they're very similar in age. We went to the high school to have a look around. And as we left, I got the key takeaway from each of my children from the day. My son was really excited he could get a bacon sandwich using his thumbprint. My daughter left saying she wanted to be head girl. So I think she's going to be fine, and I think he'll get some breakfast. So that's good. Joanna, if I can continue with you.
So for me, I'm in line with everything that's said here, but at the end of the day, especially in finance, especially in technology, especially in the convergence of FinTech, the only way to answer the question from my point of view is the value proposition of women in leadership roles. So we need to speak the speak of CEOs that are driven by quarterly profits, quarterly returns. There's countless studies, whether it's HBR, Forbes, any of the large think tanks, consulting firms, speak to ROI, improve market share, significantly improve market share, profitability, yes, diverse products, so we need to speak the same language as opposed to creating artificial programs to tick the box or speaking about, mentoring programs not being sponsored. Let's speak the speak of what makes Wall Street, what makes organizations tick. And if you integrate that message with the value proposition of women in leadership roles, then I think we can bridge the gap or start to bridge the gap.
Thank you. Heather.
So when I heard this question, I had to just take a step back and think, I just wonder how often we ask, why are men important to FinTech? It's always women. And I look forward to the opportunity of time when we can just merge that gap. And when we can talk about, what's the importance of thought leaders in FinTech? And how are we driving FinTech forward and shaping the future of FinTech together? So I agree with what the entire panel said, but it's just it's something that I look forward to. I think there's opportunity to bridge that gap. Women are clearly very important to FinTech. I think the world's expecting it, and I hope that we can provide that in the very near future.
Heather, I'll say I host more of these panels than is probably healthy, but this is the first time I've heard it flipped like that. So one, that's an incredible point, an incredible perspective, and two, do you mind if I steal that question for future events?
Absolutely.
Is that okay? Thank you very much. I will give you full credit.
Does she get a royalty on that one?
Absolutely not. Let's move on to the affectionately called, they gave me their jacket and they asked me for coffee challenges question, because whenever I talk about some of the challenges for women in any industry, there is always that story. Everyone has had that story. They are in the meeting and they've been treated completely the wrong way. And I think everyone has one of those stories. But let's dig into the challenges that women face working in the sector. Meryem, if I could start with you, what are your thoughts on that?
Sure, and you wanted us to do the positive spin on this one, yet with the key challenges. So
yeah, I'm taking the challenges off
right,
to talk about that.
Right. So I won't spend too much time on the ones that we already know. Right. I think the leadership gap is real. We heard the numbers. We're making progress. And progress is just proof of possibility, right? So, we know we have still so much to be done, but we also need to acknowledge how far we've come. Because if you don't do that, you can't really take a barometer in terms of how much more we need to go. So progress is proof of possibility. Progress is momentum, and momentum fuels change. So, but with that, leadership gap is real. When you look at globally, only about 6% of CEOs are women. On the other hand, when you look at board seats, interesting stat, about 23% of boards are held by women globally. So we're making progress. So we really need to be optimistic about that. But it is a gap. I think the second gap is the funding gap, right? I think the female founders in FinTech space only receive a fraction of VC, and I still think there is investor bias, against the female founders. Another one is work-life balance, and maybe to Roberta's question, the point, it's not really just unique to FinTech. This always-on startup culture can tend to clash with the caregiving demands of women. So, that's something that we need to continue to work on and offer flexible policies for women to stay and climb the ladders. Another gap or challenge is lack of role models. I think Joanna mentioned that. We really need to see them at the top in order to inspire the young generations. So we kind of really need to speak, as Joanna said. I'm a firm believer of that. Embrace challenges as well, right? I mean, I think it is a gap when you think about, you first need the courage and then the confidence come, right? So for women entering into FinTech, take up on that challenge. But I think there's a gap there, right? I think we're holding ourselves back, with that courage and then the confidence coming in. Last but not least, which is disheartening, but I think there's a recognition gap. Women's achievements tend to be overshadowed, and industry is still male heavy, with the exception of this panel where we're all talking about the key challenges and women in FinTech. But I hope we can rebuild where women's contributions are acknowledged, they are amplified, and inspirational for the young generations.
Two things I would take from that. First, the courage, then the confidence. I love that expression. We need that on a mug. That should be part of our branded range of merchandise. I love that expression. And secondly, the always-on culture, the fact that that's now being put into law with regulations in various parts of the world, that's got to be a positive thing, I think, as well, because there is that pressure to be the person who always answers their emails at whatever time of the evening and so forth. That pressure is real. I'm sure every person in this room will know that and feel that if you're the one person in the team that doesn't do that. So, no, that's a very, very strong point. Roberta?
I'm just going to add a couple of points. One is also how do we keep women in the job? Because it's not just the recruitment, it's not just the role models, but actually lots of women leave halfway through their career. And actually when we look at the stats, only, I think it's around 3.5%, something like that, leave because they want more flexibility, because of caring of like families. But actually most women leave because they lack recognition, they lack the opportunity to grow, they lack career advancement. So we still have a lot of work there. And the thing that I want to make sure we don't do is, as a society, as a leadership, to say, oh, we have invested so much so far, so job done, right? Actually not. It's not job done. We're still there. We have made progress, but we're nowhere near where we should be, so more work is needed. So we really have to think more intentionally about what do we do for women and for other underrepresented groups. One thing that I would also just throw in the mix, and I want to be a bit challenging towards the women themselves, ourselves, is also our own attitude sometimes that is in the way. And I'll bring an example. So I'm a carer, besides being a mom and besides having a career. I have a special needs child. My second born actually was born with a heart condition. We spent weeks in hospital when he was little. And when I shared the story with actually a group of women, was a smaller event, I got a couple of interesting questions from the audience. So it was, again, these were all women. And they asked me, did you ever think about taking a career break for caring for my children and stay at home? And I thought, this is interesting. Like, would you ask the same question to my husband? Like, why? Why is this question still coming up? Yeah, we all thought about that, both me and my husband. But I think we're still in that mindset of expecting the woman to do this, expecting the woman to care about the children, expecting the woman to care about the shopping and clean the house. And sometimes it's actually real. And I think a catalyzer for my career was definitely having an amazing husband that supported me along the way. But it's also in ourselves, so it's both having partners, a family, but also colleagues that really understand and that starts shifting that mindset that it's not a woman's job, it's everyone's job, and it's a shared responsibility, but also on ourselves. of stop thinking that it's just our job, and if we don't do it, nobody will do it. And I think that would pave a long way for us.
Absolutely. Joanna, your thoughts?
I always like this question on challenges because the list is so long. As you can hear, we've all represented here, certainly visibility, certainly bias, certainly balance or lack thereof. I would add cultural challenges as well. Coming myself from a traditional Greek household, there was no expectation of attending university. My role in society, my role in the family was pretty clear. And that's very strong as well in Italy and other countries, right? I also have 2 adult daughters who ask me this question, and they're also not in FinTech because they see the life that I've led. So maybe good, maybe not so good, but they've chosen their own career paths. And when I think about this question, challenges, I reflect on my career at this stage and really have taken an approach where I'm aware of the challenges, but I focus on what I can control and influence and change. So, if I'm unhappy with the situation, am I advocating for myself? Is my voice being heard? Am I taking no for an answer, or am I not taking no for an answer? Making sure that I have content, I have knowledge, right? As an individual, as a professional, people can look at me gender neutral, let's say, right? In the sense that I'm not male, I'm not female, and they can look at me as a professional. So what can I do in terms of how I invest in myself, how I learn, how I grow, how I take the most challenging, complex transformations available to mankind, right? And so in the end, I'm aware of the challenges. I do what I can. I've done a lot in terms of setting up women's networks, sponsorship, mentorship, but also what can I do for myself as opposed to spending excessive energy on the challenges and the half-empty view of this topic.
It is always interesting finding out what your children think of what you do.
Yeah.
I did ask mine if they ever consider doing what I do, and they say, no, Dad, I want a proper job. Makes you feel so good. Sorry, let's move on. Heather.
So in terms of challenges, great points from the panel, but I always go back to what can we do about it? And I look at a friend of mine in the audience, Isa, who just finished university, started her career in FinTech. How do we lift each other up? And even if it's just taking 30 minutes to say, how can I help your career? Mm-hmm. Quick story is one of my general counsels, right when I started my career, put me in her seat, literally put me in her seat behind the desk. And she said, I want to see how you feel in this power seat. She took the time and she cared. So I think, just the challenges, how do we overcome them? And even if they're just little micro ways to help the next person become, just more elevated in their careers in FinTech, I say we pass it on. Mm-hmm.
Everyone has one of those little stories, and that's so nice and the fact you remember that is fantastic. Ava, briefly, your thoughts on challenges?
I'm just going to pick up on the other side of overcoming the challenges. I totally agree with what you're saying is, you got to represent and come with a fact base and have a voice. I think that's part of the challenges is getting talked over. There's some stats around that. But if you've got an opinion, put it out there. Don't talk for talk's sake. Come with a fact base, come with a point of view that's relevant to the conversation. You'll often find if you're a woman, you're the only one in the conversation, but I don't think about that. It's just I'm here to solve the problem. So if you think about just what's the problem, how do you solve it, and be very focused on taking the tough challenges and overcoming them, you'll find the way through, I think.
As Roberta said a moment ago, with courage then comes confidence. I'm making sure I remember that one. We are rapidly running out of time, and I still wanted to get a little bit of advice from each of you for sort of your younger selves coming into the industry. But I also don't want to monopolise questions. Is there anything immediate from the room anyone has question-wise? That suggests no, which is good, actually, for once, because I'm really running out of time. So thank you for that. So just in 30 seconds each or so, because we, as I say, are a bit tight on time, advice you'd give to your younger self coming into the industry. Roberta, if we can start with you.
Well, I would just tell to myself, look, you always have imposter syndrome. You have to live with it. Everyone has it. and it's real. Even your male colleagues have it, but you have it worse perhaps, but you're actually a big deal. So start believing in that and chin up.
You're actually a big deal. I love that. We've got a whole range of mugs waiting to be made from this conversation. Mugs, we could do a whole merch range. And yes, we can do royalties. Joanna.
I have a mantra. The acronym is CALM. C stands for confident, be confident in yourself. A stands for advocate, advocate for yourself. L for learning in terms of investing, growing in yourself. And M mean mentoring. So either being a mentor or being a mentee. So that's a framework that I've used over the years if I was to speak to my younger self.
Thank you. Heather.
I would say dare to be uncomfortable early on and take risks and help lift everyone up around you.
Simple as that. Ava.
Yeah, I was going to go with the, find a mentor and be a mentor, I think is a real piece of it, because having someone there to guide you, it doesn't have to be a woman, it could be a man or a woman that just is there when opportunities arise, and so they can be the one putting your name forward for that opportunity. So just think about that and lending their experience, so you don't have to sort of stumble your way through it, cast off of them. And then give that back when you get the chance, is be a mentor to others. And I think the other thing too, is we sort of think of FinTech as like, oh, it's engineers and that type of thing. There's many different roles that you can play, whether that's account management, HR, finance, design. It can be anything to touch. If this is an industry that you're interested in, is you can come at it from a lot of angles, transfer those skills over. So just think about the different roles that you could play, and it doesn't have to be where you are today. You can transfer those skills into FinTech.
And last but not least, Meryem, final word.
Everything said has been, really hard to mind. But I think, one, your network is your accelerator. Seek those mentors early on in your life. Setbacks are not roadblocks. They're just crash courses. Really, need to, again, we fall only to be able to get up again.
You need to write a book. You've got some great sayings.
I'm fairly sure, to be fair, I'm sure that's
passionate about
I'm
this.
sure that's from Batman.
But really, and be intentional about impact. And this really is hard to mind. Want to be part of the solutions that are built for transparency and fairness and inclusivity, and challenge the bias when you see it. We can all be part of the solution. And to men and women who are out there showing up every day to make a difference, you're seen, you're known, and thank you for that.
Thank you very much. Well, we've barely scratched the surface of everything I wanted to get through, but we've fitted an extraordinary amount into the last 40 minutes or so. A huge thank you to the panel, to Joanna, to Heather, to Ava, to Meryem, and to Roberta.